Good afternoon, students. So today I'm going to go over the final chapter in this series on verb tenses. So we're going to go over future tense. And so we're going to go over the different kinds of future tenses such as the simple future tense, the future progressive, the future perfect, and the future perfect progressive. So without further ado, this will be the final video in this series about verb tenses. So I will start sharing my screen. All right, future tense. The simple future is the easiest future tense to understand. Jack will finish his work tomorrow. So what is the difference between the simple future and be going to? And so both be going to and will express the simple future tense. The only difference is I'm going to go to the store. I will go to the store. Now, for a native speaker of English, if I say I'm going to go to the store, sounds a lot more informal than if I said I will go to the store, which sounds a lot more formal. So if you want to write your essay and you want it to sound more formal English, you want to say I will be going to the store instead of the conversational way of saying I'm gonna go to the store. Okay, so that to me is the difference, is that gonna go to the store sounds more informal. So if you're going to talk to your friends, your family, people you know, then you would say, I'm going to go to the store. If you're going to talk to your boss or people at work, people you don't know very well, or people you're trying to impress, as educated, you will use the more formal tone and say, I will go to the store tomorrow. So that's mainly the difference between the simple future and then the simple future and be going to. All right, so here's some more. According to the weather forecast, it will be cloudy tomorrow. According to the weather forecast, it is going to be cloudy tomorrow. There's really no difference in meaning between will be and going to. It's only a difference in tone. So if I'm going to talk to my friend, I would say to my friend, hey, did you know, Barbara, tomorrow's going to be a beautiful day. Okay, if I'm going to talk to my boss, yes, sir. And tomorrow I saw in the forecast that it will be a nice day tomorrow. That's it. So that's the difference between those two. So that's very, very simple. And then expressing the future in time clauses. And so if you're going to use an if clause, how would you use this? So what is a time clause? A time clause is whenever you use after, before, or when. In other words, when you're in the sentence, you're expressing when something takes place. So a time clause is a clause in the sentence that expresses when something takes place. After I read the book, when I read the book, before I read the book, that sort of thing. So before, after, as soon as, until the bell rings, I have to keep seated in my classroom. So when, before, after, as soon as, until, those are all known as time clauses. So how do we use the future tense in a time clause? So Bob will come soon. When Bob comes, we will see him. Linda is going to leave soon. Before she leaves, she is going to finish her work. I will get home at 5:30. After I get home, I will eat dinner. The taxi will arrive soon. As soon as it arrives, we'll be able to go to the airport. They are going to come soon. I'll wait here until they come. So when Bob comes, so when plus subject plus verb. And so we don't use when Bob will come. Okay, we tend to use in American English, we use present tense when we have a time clause. Okay, and so here will or be going to is not used in a time clause. The meaning of the clause is future, but the simple present tense is used. A time clause that begins with such words as, I just read that already, before, after, as soon as, until, while. And when he comes, we'll see him, or we'll see him when he comes. Now, sometimes you can use the present progressive in a time clause. While I am traveling in Europe next year, I'm going to save money by staying in youth hostels. So sometimes the present perfect is used in a time clause to express the activity that will be in progress. Or I will go to bed after I finish my work. I will go to bed after I have finished my work. So you can also use the present perfect as well as the present tense. Occasionally, the present perfect is used in a time clause, and it has the same meaning. In other words, I have finished my work, I finished my work, emphasizes the completion of something that finished. There's only such a nuance, a slight nuance, a difference in which I have finished my work has a slightly more, it's, of a past tense, something that's a little bit in the past and happens into the future, as opposed to after I finish my work sounds a little bit more like it's something like a habit, and it's something that's happening right now. And so for a native speaker, then I finish my work sounds more like it's right now, whereas I have finished my work sounds like something that's more complete because you're trying to emphasize you started that work and now you're finished. So that's more of an emphasis, not as much of an emphasis as I have been working, or something. When we start doing future perfect, anything perfect progressive where you're pissed, and that's something different. But when you're using the future perfect, or when you're using the perfect tense or the simple tense, there's just a slight nuance in, but basically you just have to know that we don't use the future tense in time clauses. That's all this particular here. We'll be there when you arrive tomorrow. After the rain stops, I'm going to sweep the front porch. I'm going to start making dinner before my wife gets home. I'm going to wait here until Jessica comes. Actually, all of these sentences look correct. I think they just want you to underline where the time clause is. Oh, okay. Yeah, when, this is a time clause. After the rain stops is a time clause. Before my wife gets home is a time clause. Until Jessica comes is a time clause. As soon as the war is over is a time clause. And time clauses always have present tense. You don't say as soon as the war will be over. So that's American English. It might be different with British English. So I'll get home around 6. When I get home, I will call Sharon. So always the time clause has the present tense. I'm going to watch a television program, but before I watch the program, I will write a letter to my parents. So notice how the simple future is used after the time clause, but when we're using the time clause before I watch, or when I watch, or when I get, it's always in the present tense. As soon as the rain stops, I will walk to the store to get some film. I'm a junior in college. After I graduate with a BA next year, I intend to enter graduate school and work for an MA. Perhaps I will go on for a PhD after I get my master's degree. So here you would say, I will go on for a PhD after I get my my PhD. So always use the present tense in your time clauses. Okay, so here. So you can using the present progressive and simple present to express future time. My wife has an appointment with a doctor. She is seeing Dr. North next Tuesday. Sam has already made his plans. He is leaving at noon tomorrow. What are you going to do this afternoon? After lunch, I am meeting a friend of mine. We are going shopping. Would you like to come along? The simple present. The museum opens at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Classes begin next week. John's plane arrives at 6:05 next Monday. So the present progressive may be used to express future time when the idea of the sentence concerns a planned event or a definite intention. A future meaning for the present progressive tense is indicated either by future time words in the sentence or by the context. And another thing I'd like to add is that if you're going to be using present progressive for your future tense, let's just say it sounds very conversational. It sounds much better to say, she will see Dr. Smith next Tuesday. That's more formal than she is seeing Dr. Smith. That it means exactly the same thing, but will is always more formal. And she is seeing Dr. Smith. It's so conversational. That's the way people talk. Okay, people are being lazy and not wanting to form they just want to say, anyway, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that this is more conversational if you're going to use the present progressive to express future time. So after lunch, I am meeting a friend of mine. We are going shopping. And so it's just like we are going to. So when we use present progressive, it's very conversational. And here, the simple present can also be used to express future time. The museum opens at 10. That means that every day. That's because for the simple present, it's used for habit. The sun rises every morning. John exercises at 10 o'clock every morning. So if it's something that happens over and over and over again as a habit, then you can use the present tense as a kind of tomorrow or in the future. Okay, and so classes begin January 9th. Okay, so we're on Christmas break right now, and so all of my classes for my two schools, classes begin next week, or classes actually begin January 9th. Or I could say classes will begin January 9th. Or I can say classes are going to begin January 9th. They all mean the same thing. It means that classes are beginning January 9th. So you have many different ways in which you can express the simple future. Remember that all of these ways are different ways of expressing the simple future. Okay. When I graduate, I'm going to return home. When students graduate, they receive diplomas. So here we're talking about, the present, the habitual present, which means that it's something that happens all the time as a habit. And so something that happens consistently. So that's when we use the simple present. When I am home alone in the evening, I like to read or watch television. So something that you do every night, something that you do regularly. That's when we use the simple present. So that's how you can use the simple present to express the future. Once again, that's very common. And most of my ESL students, as well as my native speakers, have no trouble with this part of that's why I don't really go over it. So Tony will arrive at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Okay, so that's the simple. They all mean the same thing. And they are all of these sentences mean the same thing. It means something that's going to happen in the future. So Tony will arrive at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Tony is going to arrive at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Tony is arriving at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. Tony arrives at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. When Tony arrives, remember that when you have a time clause, it's always in the present tense. So when Tony arrives, we will have a party. Or we are going to have a party. Or we'll be having a party. Okay, so you can actually have all of these ways of saying the simple past. The only difference is that if you're going to use is going, is arriving, arrives, or when arrives, that is a lot more conversational, okay, informal, like when you're talking to your friends and family. And then if you want to talk to your boss, you want to seem formal and professional, you will say, Tony will arrive at 8 tomorrow morning. Maybe without that inflection. I'm just only doing that inflection to give you an idea of when you use will, it sounds like you're so upper stuffed. You can't overuse it because then you're going to sound snobby. So, you got to know when to, vary your tenses. But basically, I just wanted you to know, no, it doesn't sound snotty to use will. It just makes you sound professional. Okay, you got to know the difference between professional and snotty, and that's a different video. So basically, I just want you to know, and when you're writing, and if you're going to write a formal essay, and you want to write about something in the future, once again, you would use Tony will arrive at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. And then if you're going to write something like, so if you're writing to your teacher, writing to your boss, you would say Tony will arrive at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. If you're writing your email to your best friend, to your mother or grandmother, and then it can be informal, then you can say Tony is going to arrive. Tony is arriving tomorrow. When Tony arrives, we'll have a party. All of that informal English. Let's see. And most native speakers know this. They just hear it instinctively. But I have to usually teach that to ESL students who they would just think it's all the same. It's tomorrow. What's the difference? Then when you learn a new language, you don't know the nuances. It's just like when you learn a new language, you don't get all the buts of all the jokes. That's the hardest thing. Humor is difficult. That's also another video if you're learning another language. So here, use the present progressive to express future time. I am meeting Jennifer at the library at 5 o'clock. Why are you in such a hurry? I have to be at the airport in an hour. I am catching the 4 o'clock plane to New York. So I am catching, so that's I will catch. So I am catching is like the informal way of saying it. And if you're going to tell your boss, you would say, I will catch the 4 o'clock plane at 4 o'clock. Oh, I will catch the plane at 4 o'clock. If you're talking to your mother, you say, I'm catching the 4 o'clock plane to New York. Whatever. Okay, so that's the difference. Won't go over all of this. Future progressive. Oops. So up till now, we've been talking about the simple future in which you just say, I will go to the store. And when we have the simple tenses, it's one action completed. Once we do the future progressive, that means we have one action that's still going on. That's all it is. Future progressive and any of the progressive tenses means you have one action that's still going on. So I will begin to study at 7 o'clock. You will come at 8 o'clock. I will be studying when you come. Okay? So I will be studying means you have two actions, and then you have one action in the future in which the person is still studying when the other person arrives. Okay? And it can be right now I am sitting in class. At this time tomorrow, I will be sitting in class. So the future progressive expresses an activity that will be in progress at a time in the future. Don't call me at 9 because I won't be home. I am going to be studying at the library. So the progressive form of be going to can also be used to express something that's going to be happening in the future and some duration that's going to be happening in the future. Don't get impatient. She will be coming soon. Don't get impatient. She will come soon. Sometimes there's little or no difference between the future progressive and the simple future, especially when the future event will occur at an indefinite time in the future. And so she will be coming or she will come. And so here, the only difference is in tone. Okay, don't get impatient. She will come soon. Sounds more formal, slightly more formal than don't get impatient. She will be coming soon. And so if you want to be like talking to your boss, you would say she will come soon. If you're going to be talking to your friends, she will be coming soon. So there's only a difference. And once again, I have to teach this to my ESL students. They can't hear the nuances. So that's really hard for them. For a native speaker, and when I say native speaker, that means someone who only knows English. I'm not talking about someone who also speaks Spanish and English together, because some of those students are almost like my ESL students. It all depends on how well you know your English. So for some ESL students, they speak Spanish at home or Chinese at home, and then they only speak English at work or at school. So some of those students consider themselves ESL students. But some of them consider themselves native speakers. So that's where you get the blurry, I'm not an ESL student, I'm a native speaker. I was born here, even if she speaks Spanish at home. Anyway, that's a case-to-case thing. So let's get to the next one. So future progressive is when you have one action in the future that keeps going on and on and on. So tomorrow at this time, I will not be studying, because tomorrow at this time, it will be getting close to Christmas Eve. And so tomorrow at this time, I will be relaxing, watching TV, for instance. So that means I will be watching TV while the rest of my family exchange gifts, or I will be taking pictures. Actually, not watching TV, I will be taking pictures while the rest of my family exchanges presents, because I'm the photographer so that's an action that's happening while another action is happening. Okay, future perfect. I will graduate in June. I will see you in July. By the time I see you, I will have graduated. So the future perfect expresses an activity that will be completed before another time or event in the future. I will have finished my homework by the time I go out on a date tonight. And so when we use future perfect, that is a completed action in the future. And so I will have finished this lecture by 10:30, okay? Or by midnight, I will have finished this lecture and I will be asleep. That sort of thing. So something that's complete in the future is future perfect. Future perfect progressive. So here, whenever you have, and also when you have the perfect tenses, you always have two events happening. If you have the simple tenses, that's one action that's completed. If you have the progressive tense, that's one action that's going on. If you have the perfect tenses, you have two actions. Being compared. Okay, so that's how come you got these two X's. Each X represents an action. So here, X number 1, this person will graduate in June, so by the time the person sees her in July, she will have graduated. And so by 2025, I'm hopeful that all the students I'm currently teaching in 2022 will have graduated by 2025, okay? Or before that. So future perfect, two actions, and one that's happening in the future tense. The future perfect, it's always the first one, just like the past perfect. Perfect tense is always the one that happens first before you have the other simple tense. So that I will graduate or I will have graduated, always the perfect tense happens first. Okay, so the first action that happens in the future first is future perfect. Then you have your simple future. Perfect always means that it happens before the other one. Just like you have past perfect and present perfect. Anything perfect happens before. Okay, that's what you have to remember. Is that when you have a perfect tense, one action happens before the other. And it's always the perfect tense that happens first. So here you would say, I will have graduated. That means you finished by the time you see me. So I will have graduated in June is the first future action before I see you in July. That's the second action. So that the future perfect is one future action, future perfect. Then you have the second simple future. So remember, future perfect first, then simple future. Two actions, one happening before the other. And June always happens before July. So that's why we use the future perfect. June of 2023. In June of 2023, I will have celebrated my brother's birthday by the time it's July of 2023. For instance, so that means that June I will have celebrated. That's future perfect. Future perfect progressive. I will go to bed at 10 p.m. Ed will get home at midnight. At midnight, I will be sleeping. I will have been sleeping for 2 hours by the time Ed gets home. The future perfect progressive emphasizes the duration of an activity that will be in progress before another time or event in the future. And so here, I will have been sleeping 2 whole hours by the time Ed gets home. And so if I want to emphasize using emotion in which one future event happens before another future event, so future perfect progressive always happens first, then you have your simple future. But the difference between this one is this is a completed action, and I'm saying this as in I will have been asleep for 2 hours by the time Ed gets home. That's the future perfect, okay? I will have been asleep. But in the future perfect, I will have been sleeping for 2 whole hours. I'm emphasizing how tired I am. Remember, perfect progressive is when you emphasize the duration because you're so tired, you're so pissed, you drama queen, you're trying to drama queen it. When you emphasize some kind of, I've been waiting for hours, or by tomorrow, I will have been waiting for hours for something. So when you use perfect progressive, you are emphasizing an action that comes first and it's still in progress as it collides into another action. Yeah. When Professor Jones retires next month, he will have taught for 45 years. Okay, so I'm going to say it like this. When Professor Jones retires next month, he will have taught for 45 years. I'm saying that as a fact. Okay, now I want to emphasize the duration of something. I want to get dynamic. That's French. I want to get dramatic. Okay, that's more English. Okay, in French you would say dynamique. Okay, in English I want to get dramatic. So when Professor Jones retires next month, he will have been teaching for 45 years. Can you believe it? So that means that when he will have been teaching, this is the 45 years. So it's some kind of, in other words, he's still teaching, and by the time he retires. So always the future perfect progressive is the first action. Anything perfect happens first, then you have your simple tense. So that he will have been teaching 45 years first, then he retires. So you have to notice that the progressive tense, the perfect progressive tense, always happens first. And so sometimes the future perfect and the future perfect progressive have the same meaning. Okay, they do have the same meaning, it's only how much you emphasize it. It's an emotional thing. It means the same thing, except one is more, it's tone. One is more of a formal tone, and one is very excited. And we tend to get excited around our friends and family, and we tend to try to not let people see you sweat, and your boss, for instance, when you want to talk formal. Okay, you don't go to your boss, otherwise your boss will think you're crazy. So you would use future perfect. Okay, will have taught for 45 years. You add a little dignity to it. Then you go to your mother and you jump up and down, you tear at your hair, and you go, he will have, can you believe it? He will have been teaching. Okay, so that's the difference. They actually have a similar meaning in some cases, and the only difference is in tone. Future perfect is more of formal, and future perfect progressive is not. Also, future perfect is more of a finished action, while future perfect progressive is when you have something crashing into each other. Okay, that's what makes it dramatic. And so if you're writing your essay, you want to sound dramatic. You want to give a dramatic nuance to what you're writing, and you would use future perfect progressive. If you want your character to sound more, formal, you would use the future perfect. So this is why that understanding your verb tenses is very important in how you write your essay, because then you can manipulate how your reader reacts to whatever it is you're writing. Do you want your reader to react emotionally? Then, okay, we're going to use the future perfect progressive. Do you want your reader to just, okay, that you don't react, it's just a fact, then we use the perfect tense. But in both cases, in both the perfect tenses, the future perfect always happens always happens in the future before the other simple future. Okay, so that pretty much, this is it. I think this is pretty much a wrapping up all of the tenses in English. Okay, and it's a lot, because I know in Chinese you only have 3 tenses, I think. Today, tomorrow, and today, yesterday, and tomorrow. That's it, okay? You say something that happened today, you say something that happened yesterday, and tomorrow, and period. That's it. So in that sense, Chinese is way easier than English. So that's why when I teach my Chinese ESL students, they're so lost, because their language only has 3 verb tenses, and now they've got to differentiate 12 tenses. Good luck on that. So that's why, but that's why I love teaching. You know, I love to see my students learn. Okay, so let's try this out. Anne and Andy got married on June 1st. Today is June 14th. They will have been married for 2 weeks. So if they got married June 1st, then by June 14th, they will have been married for 2 weeks. By June 7th, they will have been married for 1 week. And by June 28th, they will have been married 4 weeks. The traffic is terrible. We're going to be late. By the time we get there, remember, always present tense when we have a time clause. By the time we get to the airport, Bob's plane will have already arrived. Perfect tense. So that means that you have the perfect tense happening first, and then Bob gets there. Okay, so that's not very good. The traffic was very heavy. By the time we get to the airport, Bob's plane will have already arrived. So that's the difference. The future perfect always comes first before the simple future. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Okay, and that's it. Okay, I'm not going to do chapter 5 in this series, because then it gets into different kinds of clauses, and I will do a different series. In my next series, I will do different kinds of clauses: adverb clauses, adjective clauses, noun clauses. That's going to be chapter 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to do it different. So the first 4 chapters of this book deals mainly with verb tenses. And then I will, in my next video series, I will cover clauses. Clauses, there are so many different kinds of clauses, and this has to do with sentence structure. So when I teach clauses, I'm teaching a different unit. I'm teaching what is a clause, what's a phrase, what is a simple sentence, a compound sentence, a complex sentence. That's a different topic. So I will introduce all the different clauses: adjective clauses, adverb clauses, noun clauses, and all the different, all that stuff, dependent, independent clauses, all the different clauses you will learn in a different series. But in this series, I just want to introduce to you the 12 main verb tenses. You've got the simple tenses, the simple present, simple past, simple future, in which you have one action happening in the future, in the present, and yesterday. Okay? Then you have the progressive tenses, where you have one action that's continuing, either in the present, the past, or the future. Then you have the perfect tenses, where you have 2 actions, and always the perfect tense happens first. Okay? So you have that first perfect tense action happening before the simple action. And then you have that happening in the present, the past, and the future. Then you have the perfect progressive tenses, where you have one action, perfect action, happening before another one, except this action, it keeps totally colliding into the next action, okay, because it's a progressive. Boom. So those are the 12 main, in a nutshell. Wow, I'm losing my voice. In a nutshell, those are the 12 main tenses in English. So if you have any questions, you can always email me. So have a great day, and I look forward to the time when I can do all the clauses with you.